When I first moved into Maplewood Estates, I thought I had finally found the perfect neighborhood. Wide streets lined with old oak trees, manicured lawns that looked like they belonged in a magazine, and houses that radiated comfort and stability. After years of dealing with cramped apartments, this place felt like a fresh start. But what made it truly perfect for me wasn't just the house or the quiet atmosphere, it was the fact that my service dog, Daisy, had plenty of space to thrive. Daisy wasn't just any dog. She was my partner, my lifeline. A beautiful golden retriever with a calm temperament, Daisy had been trained to detect early signs of my medical condition and alert me before things could spiral out of control. She had saved me more times than I could count. People often thought of service dogs as an accessory, like a pet with a fancy vest, but the truth is, Daisy gave me something priceless: independence. The first week was a dream. Neighbors waved politely when I passed by with Daisy, and a few even stopped to say how beautiful she was. Kids playing outside asked if they could pet her, but I always explained kindly that she was working. Most parents nodded with understanding. For once, I felt like maybe I had chosen the right place to settle down. That feeling didn't last long. It was during our third evening walk that I met her, Karen. I had already heard whispers from other neighbors about her, though never by name. Phrases like board president, always watching, and don't get on her bad side floated around, but I figured it was just neighborhood gossip. Every community had that one busybody, right? I didn't think much of it. Karen spotted Daisy before she even looked at me. She stood at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed tightly over her chest, lips pursed like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Her eyes zeroed in on Daisy's service vest. "That's a fake," she said flatly, pointing at Daisy. "We don't allow pets in this neighborhood. Read your HOA handbook." Her voice carried the kind of authority that demanded compliance, like she was used to people caving the moment she spoke. But I wasn't some renter sneaking in a dog. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. "She's not a pet," I replied evenly. "She's a service dog. Under federal law, she's allowed anywhere I am." Karen scoffed, the sound sharp enough to cut. "Oh please. Everyone says that now. Slap a vest on a mutt and suddenly it's a service animal? I wasn't born yesterday. You can't fool me." Daisy, of course, remained unfazed, sitting politely at my side, her big brown eyes steady on me as if waiting for her next command. That was the thing about service dogs, they didn't react to provocation. They stayed calm, even when their handlers were boiling inside. I wanted to walk away, but something in Karen's tone told me this wasn't just a passing comment. This was the beginning of something bigger, something uglier. I tightened my grip on Daisy's leash and forced a polite smile. "Look, I'm not here to cause problems. I moved here for peace and quiet. Daisy is trained, certified, and she's here because I need her. That's all." Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips twitching as if she was restraining the urge to yell. "We'll see about that," she muttered, turning sharply on her heel and marching back up her driveway. I shook my head, trying to brush it off. Maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe she'd forget about it. But deep down, something told me she wasn't going to let it go. People like Karen didn't forget. They made it their mission to control what they didn't understand. As Daisy and I continued our walk, I caught a glimpse of another neighbor across the street, an older man watering his lawn. He gave me a sympathetic look and a small shake of the head, as if to say, "Good luck, you're going to need it." That silent warning made my stomach knot. By the time I returned home, I was unsettled. I tried to reassure myself that I was overreacting, that Karen was just one neighbor out of many. But that night, as I watched Daisy curl up beside my bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that our peaceful new beginning was already under threat. Little did I know, Karen's obsession with proving Daisy was fake would set off a chain of events that went far beyond HOA rules. A chain that would end with federal agents knocking on doors. The next morning, I tried to push my run-in with Karen out of my mind. I told myself it was just one cranky neighbor blowing off steam. But when I stepped outside with Daisy for her morning walk, I noticed something odd, a folded piece of paper stuck to my front door. At first, I thought it was just a flyer. But as I unfolded it, bold black letters scrawled across the page stopped me cold. No pets allowed. Remove the dog immediately or face HOA fines. It wasn't typed, but handwritten, sharp, angry strokes, as if the writer had jabbed the pen into the paper with every word. No signature, but I didn't need one. The message practically screamed Karen. Daisy looked up at me with her calm, trusting eyes, completely unaware of the hostility aimed at her existence. I crumpled the note in my fist. This wasn't about rules. This was harassment. By the time I got back from the walk, Karen was waiting. She was standing across the street, arms folded, eyes fixed on me like a hawk circling prey. She didn't bother with small talk. "You got my message?" she said. I raised an eyebrow. "If you mean the threatening note, yeah. Not exactly the neighborly welcome I was expecting." "It's not a threat," Karen snapped. "It's a warning. The HOA handbook clearly states, no pets over 30 pounds. And that mutt of yours looks at least 70. My jaw clenched. "She's not a pet. She's a service dog. Federal law overrides any HOA rule." Karen let out a laugh that dripped with sarcasm. "Oh, give me a break. I've been on this board for 8 years. You think you're the first person to try and scam the system? People lie about service animals all the time. Emotional support hamsters, fake vests bought online, don't insult my intelligence." "She's trained to detect medical episodes," I said firmly. "She's literally saved my life. I have documentation, a doctor's letter, and ADA rights on my side. You don't get to decide who's legitimate and who isn't." For a moment, Karen's expression flickered, uncertainty, maybe, or irritation at being challenged. But it was gone in an instant, replaced with the smug grin of someone who believed she was untouchable. "Documentation?" she scoffed. "Sure. I bet you've got a piece of paper you printed off the internet. The board isn't going to fall for that. We'll see just how legal your mutt is when I'm done." She turned as if to leave, then glanced back with a smirk. "Oh, and by the way, neighbors are already talking. They don't like liars. They don't like cheats. Keep that in mind." I stood frozen on my front steps, anger buzzing under my skin. Not only was she questioning Daisy's legitimacy, but she was actively poisoning the community against us. Later that evening, I discovered just how far she was willing to go. When I checked my mailbox, I found another notice, this one official-looking, stamped with the HOA letterhead. It claimed that I was in violation of community bylaws for keeping an unauthorized animal on the property and warned of daily fines if I didn't resolve the issue. My hands trembled as I held the letter. Karen hadn't wasted a second. She'd gone straight to the board and filed a complaint. Daisy nudged my leg gently, sensing my stress. I knelt down, burying my face in her soft fur. She was steady, calm, my anchor. But anger burned in my chest. Karen thought she could intimidate me into giving up the one thing that gave me independence. She didn't understand that I wasn't alone. That night, I pulled out my phone and began recording a log of every interaction. The note. The confrontation. The fake violation letter. If Karen wanted a war, I was going to be ready. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Daisy, about every person who relied on a service animal, about every bully who thought they could bend the law with intimidation. And Karen was about to learn a hard lesson: service dogs aren't a loophole to exploit. They're protected under federal law, and she was already walking dangerously close to breaking it. What I didn't realize then was that this battle would reach far beyond HOA meetings and nasty notes. Someone much higher than Karen was already listening. At first, I thought maybe Karen's threats would fizzle out, that she'd get bored and move on to harassing someone else's lawn gnomes or mailbox paint colors. But I underestimated her persistence. By the end of the week, it was clear she wasn't just going to be a nuisance, she was launching a full-scale campaign. The signs were subtle at first. A couple of neighbors who had previously smiled at me during walks now avoided eye contact. One even pulled their child closer when Daisy and I passed, muttering something under their breath. It stung, because Daisy had done nothing but sit calmly at my side, her vest neatly buckled, her leash short and steady. But gossip spreads fast in neighborhoods like this, and Karen was the one holding the megaphone. I found another note taped to my door 2 days later. Neighbors are uncomfortable. Do the right thing before this gets ugly. No signature again. But the handwriting? Same sharp strokes, same angry energy. Definitely Karen. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, I decided to attend. I wanted to make sure the board heard the truth directly from me, not just from Karen's poison version. Daisy patted in beside me, calm as always, her vest catching a few curious glances. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room with folding chairs and a long table where the board members sat like judges. Karen, of course, sat at the center, chin lifted high like she was queen of the neighborhood. The moment she saw Daisy, she pounced. "There it is," she announced loudly, pointing a manicured finger. "The so-called service dog." A murmur rippled through the room. Some people looked curious, others uncomfortable. I held my ground. "Her name is Daisy, and she's a federally protected service dog. I have the right to have her here." Karen laughed. "Oh, please. Everyone can buy a vest off Amazon these days. What proof do you actually have? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're breaking HOA bylaws and putting this entire community at risk." "Risk?" I repeated, incredulous. "She's trained to help with my medical condition. She doesn't bark, she doesn't bite, and she doesn't cause damage. What risk is there?" Karen leaned forward, eyes glinting. "The risk of liability. What if your dog attacks someone? What if she causes allergies? What if she bites a child? The HOA is responsible if something goes wrong, and I, for one, won't let that happen." The board members shifted uncomfortably. One of them, an older man named Mr. Benson, cleared his throat. "Karen, with respect, service animals are protected under the ADA. We can't just—" But Karen cut him off. "Protected, sure. But only if they're legitimate. And I've done my research. People abuse that law all the time. For all we know, this is just a pet disguised as a service animal. And until we get real proof, I say we enforce the bylaws." I clenched my fists, my voice steady but firm. "The ADA doesn't require me to hand over medical records or certification. All you're allowed to ask is 2 questions. Is it a service animal required because of a disability, and what task has it been trained to perform? I've already answered that. Beyond that, you're overstepping federal law." The room fell quiet for a moment. Karen's face flushed red, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "Well then," she said coldly, "if you refuse to cooperate, the HOA will have no choice but to issue fines until this situation is resolved." And just like that, the meeting moved on, as if my life and Daisy's legitimacy were just another item on the agenda. When I walked out of the clubhouse, Daisy pressed close to my leg, sensing my stress. My hands trembled on the leash, but not from fear, from fury. Karen wasn't just harassing me now. She was weaponizing the HOA itself. The next morning, the first fine notice arrived. $100. Daily, until I removed the unauthorized animal. I stared at the paper, my jaw tight. Karen thought she could bully me into giving up Daisy, into surrendering my independence. But she didn't realize I wasn't alone. I was documenting everything, every note, every meeting, every threat. And soon, she was going to learn what it meant to pick a fight not just with me, but with federal law. By the second week, I was already drowning in violation letters. Each envelope carried the same smug message: daily fines for harboring an unauthorized animal. The amounts were stacking up fast, as if Karen thought she could financially crush me into surrender. But money wasn't what kept me up at night. It was the constant feeling of being watched. Every time I stepped outside with Daisy, I'd catch Karen peering through her blinds, or worse, standing in her yard with her phone out, recording us like we were criminals. One evening, after a long day, I decided to take Daisy for a walk just to clear my head. The air was cool, the street lamps humming softly. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd have a peaceful night. But peace wasn't in Karen's vocabulary. She stormed out of her house the moment she saw us. "There you are," she screeched, her voice carrying across the street. "I've had enough of this charade." I sighed, gripping Daisy's leash tighter. "Karen, I'm not doing this with you tonight." "Oh, you don't get to walk away," she spat, marching across her lawn. "You think you can ignore HOA bylaws and nobody will care? You're a liar. That dog is a fraud, and I'm going to prove it." Daisy sat calmly at my side, tail still, eyes fixed on me. I wished I could borrow some of her composure. "Karen," I said, forcing my voice steady, "you need to stop. What you're doing is harassment. And more than that, it's against federal law. You're interfering with a service dog and a disabled person's rights. That's not just rude, it's a crime." She froze for half a second, clearly not expecting me to throw the word crime into the mix. But then her lips curled into a sneer. "A crime?" she mocked. "Don't be ridiculous. The only crime here is you scamming this neighborhood. You think waving around some fake ADA nonsense is going to scare me? Think again. I run this HOA. I decide what's allowed here." Her arrogance lit a fire in me. I pulled my phone from my pocket, hitting record. The screen glowed in the dark, capturing every word. "Actually," I said, holding the phone up just enough for her to see, "you don't get to decide. Federal law does. And you've already left notes, sent letters, and threatened me multiple times. I have it all documented." For the first time, Karen's voice faltered. "Why, you can't record me without permission." "Wrong again," I replied coolly. "In this state, it's perfectly legal to record conversations in public. And believe me, I'm going to use every second of this to show exactly how you've been treating me." Her face flushed crimson. She took a step closer, lowering her voice but dripping with venom. "Listen to me, you little fraud. I don't care about your so-called rights. That dog will be gone, or I'll make sure you regret ever moving here." Daisy shifted slightly, sensing the tension, but stayed perfectly obedient. That was the breaking point for me. I straightened my shoulders and looked Karen square in the eye. "If you keep this up, it won't be me who regrets anything. It'll be you. Because the more you push, the more evidence I gather. And when federal authorities see how you've been interfering with a service animal, you'll wish you'd left me alone." For once, Karen didn't have a quick comeback. She just glared at me, her jaw tight, before spinning on her heel and stomping back toward her house. But before she reached the door, she turned and shouted, "You'll see. The board is on my side. You don't stand a chance." I watched her disappear inside, my phone still recording, my heart pounding. Daisy leaned gently against my leg, grounding me like she always did. In that moment, I knew two things for certain. Karen wasn't going to stop. And neither was I. This wasn't just a neighborly spat anymore. This was war, and it was only a matter of time before someone far bigger than the HOA got involved. After that heated confrontation, I realized something important. Karen wasn't just spouting insults, she was digging herself into a legal hole. And if I wanted any hope of stopping her, I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. So I started recording everything. Every time I walked Daisy past her house, I made sure my phone camera was on. If Karen shouted something from her driveway, it went straight into my evidence folder. If I found another note on my door, I snapped photos before touching it, then sealed the original in a plastic bag. I even kept a log in a notebook, date, time, location, exact word said. At first, it felt excessive, like I was preparing for some courtroom drama. But deep down, I knew this wasn't paranoia. Karen was escalating, and I wasn't about to be caught unprepared. The real breakthrough came during the next HOA board meeting. The clubhouse was buzzing with its usual chatter, neighbors complaining about weeds in common areas, overdue fees, or kids leaving bikes on sidewalks. But the moment I walked in with Daisy, the atmosphere shifted. Whispers started. Eyes darted toward Karen, who sat at the head of the table like a queen about to deliver a royal decree. She didn't waste any time. "Before we continue with tonight's agenda," she announced, her voice ringing with authority, "I'd like to address the ongoing issue of the so-called service dog." The room quieted. A few people looked uncomfortable, others curious. Karen pointed straight at Daisy. "This is a pet, not a service animal. And it is in direct violation of our HOA bylaws." I felt the heat rising in my chest, but I kept my phone recording under the table. "As I've explained before," I said evenly, "Daisy is a trained service dog. She's protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. HOA bylaws cannot override federal law." Karen smirked. "We've heard that song before. But unless you can produce certification, we have no reason to believe you. Anyone can claim they need a service animal. What if the next person brings in a pig or a snake? Are we supposed to allow that too?" A few neighbors chuckled nervously. I took a deep breath. By law, you are not allowed to demand documentation. You can only ask two questions: is the dog required because of a disability, and what task is it trained to perform? I've answered both. Beyond that, this is harassment. Karen's eyes flashed with irritation. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with contempt. "What's harassment is you exploiting a loophole to get around the rules. And I, for one, won't let this neighborhood be scammed." The board members shifted uneasily. One woman whispered something to the man beside her. Another cleared his throat but said nothing. It was clear Karen's presence intimidated them. Inside, I was seething, but also oddly calm. Because I knew I had her. Every word she spoke was being recorded. Every accusation, every denial of federal law, it was all evidence now. When the meeting ended, Karen strutted out with her usual air of victory, convinced she'd won. But as I walked home with Daisy, my phone safe in my pocket, I knew the balance of power was shifting. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and played back the recording. Hearing Karen's voice on tape, so smug, so confident in her ignorance, filled me with a strange mix of anger and satisfaction. She didn't even realize she was handing me the rope to hang her case on. I backed up the files onto a hard drive, then emailed copies to myself just in case. I organized the notes, screenshots, letters, and now recordings into a neat folder labeled HOA Harassment Evidence. For the first time since moving into Maplewood Estates, I felt like I wasn't just surviving Karen's attacks, I was preparing to fight back. Daisy curled up at my feet, sighing contentedly as if she knew I had a plan. I scratched her ears and whispered, "Don't worry, girl. She thinks she's in control, but she has no idea what's coming." What I didn't realize then was just how far-reaching this evidence would go. Because once federal ears heard what Karen had said, this battle would explode into something far bigger than HOA fines or petty arguments. Karen thought she was running the neighborhood. She didn't know she was already on the radar of people who didn't play neighborhood games at all. By the time I had compiled my folder of evidence, recordings, notes, letters, even the HOA fine slips, I knew I had more than enough to prove harassment. What I didn't know was how to use it. Local police? Civil court? ADA complaint forms? It felt overwhelming. That's when my brother stepped in. Michael had worked in law for years, and while he wasn't an attorney, his connections ran deep. When I showed him the files, he didn't even let me finish explaining before he said, "This isn't just an HOA problem. This is a federal violation." I blinked. Federal? For harassment? He leaned back in his chair, tapping the stack of papers. Not just harassment. Interfering with the rights of someone with a disability. Interfering with a service animal. That falls under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and if the pattern is this aggressive, it can escalate into criminal charges. You'd be surprised how seriously the government takes this stuff. He was right. I had read about ADA protections, but I hadn't realized how much weight they carry when enforced at the federal level. Michael made a few calls. Within days, I was connected to a contact he had in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. I shared my folder, every recording, every note. To my surprise, they didn't brush me off. They listened. One of the investigators, a calm but sharp-voiced woman, told me over the phone, "What you're describing isn't just a violation of HOA rules. It's a direct violation of federal disability rights. The FBI may want to review this case." Hearing the letters FBI made my heart skip a beat. This had started as one neighbor's vendetta, and now it was moving into the territory of federal investigation? I wasn't sure whether to feel terrified or relieved. For the next few weeks, I noticed things shift. At first, it was subtle, unmarked cars parking near the clubhouse during HOA meetings, men in plain clothes asking quiet questions to other neighbors. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then Michael confirmed, they're monitoring. That's how these things work. Quiet at first, until they have enough to act. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down, oblivious to the storm brewing over her head. At the following HOA meeting, she grew bolder than ever. Daisy and I sat in the back, my phone recording as usual, while Karen stood at the head of the table with her arms crossed. "I've contacted animal control," she declared. "If this dog isn't removed within 2 weeks, we'll escalate. This so-called service animal is a liability to us all." There were murmurs in the crowd. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably, while others nodded along. Karen had managed to whip them into a frenzy of fear over nothing. But then she said the line that sealed her fate. "And if federal law doesn't like it," she sneered, "then they can come down here themselves. I'll tell them to their faces that mutts don't belong in Maplewood Estates." The room went silent for a beat. My phone caught every syllable. She had no idea that the federal law she was mocking wasn't an abstract concept anymore. It was real. It was already listening. When the meeting ended, I walked Daisy home under the glow of streetlights, my heart pounding. I knew the recording I just captured was the one that changed everything. This wasn't a petty neighbor dispute anymore. Karen had mocked federal law outright, and that was exactly what the FBI needed to hear. Later that night, I received a call from the investigator. "We've reviewed your latest evidence," she said. "You should know, this has officially moved beyond our office. The FBI is opening an inquiry." I sat frozen in my chair, Daisy resting her head on my knee. The words echoed in my ears, "The FBI is opening an inquiry." Karen thought she was untouchable because she sat at the head of a homeowners association. She thought bullying me would be easy. She had no idea that every word she spoke was already in the hands of federal agents. And soon, they weren't just going to be listening. They were going to act. The next HOA meeting was supposed to be routine, budget discussions, landscaping proposals, and a debate over whether the neighborhood pool needed new lounge chairs. But everyone knew better. Word had spread. Karen had been bragging for days that she was finally going to take down the faker with the fake dog. I almost didn't go. A big part of me wanted to stay home, keep the blinds drawn, and avoid the circus. But Daisy sat by the door, her vest already clipped on, looking at me with those steady, grounding eyes. She didn't know about fines, bylaws, or harassment. She just knew her job was to be at my side. That gave me courage. When we walked into the clubhouse, the room went quiet. All eyes turned to us. Karen sat at the head of the table, her lips curled into a smirk, gavel in hand like she was presiding over a courtroom. "Well, well," she said loudly, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The fraud decided to show up. Perfect timing. Tonight, we end this charade once and for all." Daisy sat calmly at my heel as I took a seat near the back. I pulled out my phone, as usual, and pressed record. My heart pounded, but I reminded myself, I wasn't the one in trouble tonight. Karen slammed her gavel. As HOA president, I motioned that we fine this homeowner $500 per day until the so-called service dog is removed. Anyone second? Hands began to rise, hesitant at first, then more confidently as Karen's glare swept across the room. The vote was about to pass when the door at the back of the clubhouse opened. 2 uniformed police officers stepped in, followed by 2 men in plain suits. The air shifted instantly. Conversations died. Even Karen's smirk faltered. The taller of the suited men pulled out a badge, his voice calm but commanding. "I'm Special Agent Donovan with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to have a word with this board." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if words had abandoned her. "This is a private meeting," she finally managed, her voice shaky. "You can't just barge in here." "Actually," Agent Donovan cut in smoothly, "we can. We've been monitoring complaints related to this HOA. Specifically, repeated harassment and discrimination against a disabled individual and their federally protected service dog." All eyes swung to me. My chest tightened, but I kept my chin up. Daisy shifted slightly against my leg, her calm presence anchoring me. Karen stammered, "That's ridiculous. He's lying. That's not a real service animal. This is a scam." The second agent held up a small recorder. He pressed play. Karen's voice filled the room, loud and clear, "And if federal law doesn't like it, then they can come down here themselves. I'll tell them to their faces that mutts don't belong in Maplewood Estates." The blood drained from Karen's face. Her hands trembled on the table. "Consider this your notice," Agent Donovan said firmly. "Interfering with a service animal and harassing a disabled person is a violation of federal law. Continued actions may result in criminal charges, fines, and civil liability. Do you understand, ma'am?" Karen opened her mouth but no sound came out. For the first time since I'd met her, she was speechless. The rest of the board members shrank back in their chairs, avoiding eye contact. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked relieved. The spell Karen had held over them was broken in an instant. The lead officer stepped forward. "For now, this is a formal warning. But let me be clear, if there are any further incidents, arrests will follow. We'll be in touch." The agents and officers turned to leave, their presence lingering like a storm that had just rolled through. The silence they left behind was deafening. Karen sat frozen, her gavel limp in her hand, her power shattered. I stood slowly, Daisy at my side, and for the first time since moving into Maplewood Estates, I felt taller than Karen. Stronger. Untouchable. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, everyone in that clubhouse understood the truth: Karen wasn't the law. She wasn't untouchable. She was just a bully who had finally met someone bigger than her. And that someone wore a federal badge. The HOA clubhouse had never felt so quiet. After the FBI and police walked out, Karen just sat there, her knuckles white around the gavel she hadn't dared to use again. The rest of the board avoided her eyes. Some whispered among themselves, but most sat frozen, like the walls of Maplewood Estates had suddenly crumbled around them. For years, Karen had ruled through intimidation, loud threats, bogus fines, and endless harassment. But now, after that single confrontation, the illusion of her power was gone. I remember standing with Daisy, my hand resting lightly on her vest, and realizing for the first time that I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't just surviving in that neighborhood. I was free. The fallout. Within a week, everything began to unravel for Karen. The HOA board held an emergency meeting without her. They voted to strip her of her presidency, citing misconduct, abuse of authority, and violations of federal disability law. The letter announcing her removal was short, almost cold, effective immediately. Karen R. is no longer authorized to act on behalf of Maplewood Estates HOA. But that wasn't the end. The FBI investigation didn't simply vanish after the warning. Agents interviewed several neighbors who had witnessed Karen's behavior. They reviewed years of HOA records, looking at fines and complaints she had levied against multiple residents. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she had targeted. just the one who finally pushed back. The whispers in the community grew louder. Some neighbors who had once sided with Karen now admitted they had felt bullied into silence. One woman even confessed, "I didn't think we could do anything about her until I saw you stand up to her." Karen's consequences. By the end of the month, Karen's reputation was in ruins. She was fined heavily for her violations, not by the HOA, but under federal disability protections. Rumors swirled that she had to lawyer up, expensive lawyers she could barely afford. Her friends stopped defending her. Neighbors who once cowered under her glare now avoided her entirely. She wasn't the queen bee anymore. She was the cautionary tale. And Daisy? She became something of a neighborhood celebrity. Kids would stop us on walks just to say hello. Adults, who had once eyed us suspiciously, now greeted us with respect. More than once, someone whispered, "Good for you," as we passed. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about healing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I no longer dreaded HOA letters in the mailbox. I no longer jumped at the sound of Karen's voice echoing down the street. I could walk Daisy in peace, knowing the law was on my side and the bully who tried to break me was powerless. One evening, sitting on my porch with Daisy curled at my feet, I thought about how close I'd come to giving up. To selling my house, to retreating into silence, to letting Karen win. But standing my ground, recording, documenting, reporting, had turned the tide. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Karen thought the HOA made her untouchable. She thought her gavel and her loud voice were bigger than the law. But she was wrong. Service dogs are protected by federal law. Disabled individuals have rights that no HOA president can erase. And bullies, no matter how loud, always fall silent when real authority shows up. Looking back, I realized Karen gave me something without meaning to. She gave me proof that even in the darkest, most intimidating situations, there's power in standing firm. Power in saying no more. Power in knowing the law is bigger than any HOA bully. The last time I saw Karen, she was loading boxes into her car. She avoided eye contact, her once proud posture hunched. Daisy sat at my side, watching quietly. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered every cruel word, every bogus fine, every attempt to strip away my dignity. And I realized, she wasn't a victim. She was just someone who thought she could live above the law. And the law had finally caught up. I reached down, scratched Daisy behind the ears, and whispered, "We did it, girl." She wagged her tail, and for the first time in Maplewood Estates, the air felt light. Justice had been served.